Hey guys, welcome back. Fast Monty's Garage. Last episode, we went on the first test drive of the engine rebuild, tested the new clutch, yada, yada, yada. And I know you're dying to know, what about that PCV valve you've been showing off, Mike, when you did the Valley Pan? Today's the day. We're gonna set it up. I'm gonna walk you through how to do that and the symptoms you might be seeing if you have a bad PCV system. So if you missed it, go check out the beginning of the playlist. I had an issue with my oil. It turned to sludge too quick because I had a PCV valve plumbing issue. And that's how I stumbled across ME Wagner and their killer adjustable PCV valve. That's right, you can adjust it to your engine, and we're going to go through that today. So let's go hit the workbench. Show you what a PCV valve diagram should look like for your engine, discuss some of the symptoms you might be having, and then tear into the box, see what this comes with, and get it set up. So here's what a PCV valve system should look like. It doesn't matter your engine, you have a PCV valve. It's there for a reason. That's because we have these blow-by gases that are getting by the piston when we ignite our fuels. Some of that is unburnt, and it gets mixed in here. If it doesn't get evacuated, it actually can start mixing with the oil. If that sits too long like that, it becomes acidic. It also turns to sludge super fast. That's actually the issue I had. I was not using a fuel-approved hose right here, and so it was collapsing on itself and not letting the gases out. So one of the symptoms for me was oil consumption. I was getting a ton of oil at idle. At higher RPM, it was staying in here, and it was actually providing back pressure. So I wasn't getting full RPM out of my engine. I had no idea this was the problem. So no matter what engine you have, again, you have a PCV valve somewhere. If you have a Pontiac, it's in the front of the Valley Pan or in the valve cover. Most cars have it in the valve cover, and it's sucking into the intake manifold just below the carburetor, or your carb has a inlet for exhaust manifold vacuum to pull those gases in and get reburned. Now the other side of the engine, you're going to have an inlet. So a stock Pontiac has a tube that comes out of here into the air filter area, and that's just filtering air as it goes back in. Now at high RPM, this actually acts as a dual circuit. You're actually pulling some gases out of both, and that's fine. Now our issue is, no matter where you have your PCV valve, you need air coming in. So on my engine, I no longer have the stock air cleaner. My PCV valve's here. I have two open breathers on each side. So I have air coming in that is filtered. There's filters in here on both sides, and then getting pulled out of the PCV into the manifold. That's the plan. Now the issue is with those of us running these old PCV valves, you guys have seen this before, they are only really good for a stock engine. As soon as you start modifying your engine, getting more manifold vacuum or less, you're not going to be fully utilizing a PCV system. And that's where ME Wagner comes into play. They designed this dual circuit system. You can actually run it as a single circuit if you want, and we'll go through that. But this company is created by a father-son team, both engineers, both highly skilled. If you go to their website below, they have a ton of research papers on that website. They also have their instruction manual, which looks similar to this. They also have a flow diagram to help troubleshoot. It's pretty awesome. So make sure you go check out their website. But for now, we're going to get to it. Here's what comes with the standard kit. Obviously the PCV valve, and we have several different options where we can change the spacing. We're going to talk about a baffle in a second. Change our spring rates, all the tools you need, and a vacuum gauge tuning kit, which we're going to use in a little bit. Now for Pontiac guys that cannot mount this 3/4 inch diameter thing into the Valley Pan, you can get an optional extender kit. So this mounts into the 3/8 or 1/2 inch hole in the grommet, and then you can cut this tube to length and you put this right in like that. That's the Pontiac solution. I'll show you on my engine. Ironically enough, on my engine, since I cut the manifold in half, I actually have room for this standard because I found a grommet that fits my valley pan. I'll show you guys in a second. But the other thing you can do with these is get an inline kit that actually adds a 3/8 inch barb on the end, and you can use it inline. So if you have the PCV valves outside of the valley pan on another area. So again, go check out their website for the options, but that's what comes with it. I start talking about baffles. So a baffle is located right before the inlet of the PCV valve. It's either on your valve cover or in your valley pan. So let's imagine a cross-section view. We have our inlet. This is where this gets plugged in, whether it's a valley pan or whatnot. There's typically some kind of baffling system in between the bottom of the intake here and the bottom of the valley pan, so all oil squirting up around here. You need a baffle because you don't want oil getting sucked into the PCV valve, and it has to be a big enough baffle. In the instructions, there are some good guidelines to determine if you have a big enough baffle or not. Now, if you don't have a big enough baffle, you don't have a baffling option, you can use this with an oil separator. So go through the instructions with that. Now, in my valley pan, I have the Tomahawk valley pan. I'm excited for that because my baffle is pretty big. The opening underneath the valley pan to the, basically the lifter area, the valley, and where the PCV valve is located is about 8 inches of distance. So, got a pretty good baffle there. If I have some oil consumption issues, then my next step is an oil separator. Here are the instructions, guys. Make sure you read this 3 or 4 times. It's 4 pages, all kinds of diagrams. And the last page is actually really handy. It actually goes through the symptoms you might have, so check that out. Those are some of the symptoms. You could be burning too much oil. You can be smelling oil. Your oil could be sludging too fast. Your spark plugs could be fouling. These are all symptoms of inadequate or excessive. Pretty cool. Let's try and solve those problems today, shall we? Okay, first step here for me is I have to get the engine warm, and we have to get a vacuum gauge. So here's my vacuum gauge. You can actually rent these at AutoZone or whatnot. I own this one. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what we need to do to get our vacuum reading. All right, when we get our vacuum gauge, we want to attach it to manifold vacuum. So you can usually have these plugs on the side of your carb or your throttle body. And when you take it off, when you're idling, you can hear it sucking through there, or you can cover it with your finger and it'll try and pull on your finger. That's exactly what we need to measure at idle. Some ports are actually ported for wide open throttle vacuum, so you don't want that one. You want the manifold vacuum. So I'm going to go ahead and get the engine warmed up, plug in my vacuum gauge, see what we get. All right, I'm at idle. I don't know if you can hear this or not. You hear that? That's when you take that little plug off. So I'm going to get my, my gauge, throw it on there. So it looks like we're at 14 to 15 inches of vacuum. Pretty awesome. I had no idea. All right, now we got the vacuum reading, which is cool. I never knew what it was. So say 14 to 15 is our vacuum reading. If we look at our chart, so greater than 10 inches, we use dual flow mode, because there's also fixed orifice mode. And we use the high vacuum spring. That comes preloaded in the unit. I don't have to change anything. If you have to get the low vacuum spring, that came in the little bag right here. So you have to take apart the valve, put the spring in. And we go to page 3 for dual mode instructions. And just so you guys know, the dual modes are idle and cruise. So obviously there's going to be a swap over point for vacuum. That's what we have to figure out. Okay, to start things off, we need to turn off our cruise circuit so we can only deal with the idle. So this screw probably comes already loaded in the correct position, but we take it all the way down to flush and we back it out 10 turns, which is about a ½ inch. And again, that's how it should come out of the box. So that turns off the cruise circuit during testing. So next step here is we tighten the idle screw. So take our other Allen wrench and we're going to go until it's lightly seated, which is right there. And then according to our chart, you look at your cubic inches. I'm over 400, and I'm going to use the 14 to 18. So I'm going to back out 1.5 turns. 1.5. Now you can go ahead and put this in your engine and warm it up. After you're warm, take it out. You might have to wear gloves, but we're going to take this little port screw on the bottom out. So we're going to take this out. It's small, do it on your workbench, make sure you don't lose it. There is a backup one in the bag, which is nice. And then we're going to put this little port in. This is just for getting our vacuum measurement dialed in. Now we put this back into the engine. So either with your adapter, but you're going to have your vacuum gauge hooked up to that port, like that. All right, Pontiac guys, I haven't forgotten. So here's that adapter you can get if you have a full manifold, and it would stick up through the manifold like that. And you can cut this tube to length, and then you can put your PCV valve in there, just like that. So obviously I have my port, I'm ready to put my vacuum gauge on, and this is exactly how you do it. Attach it just right there. We're going to get the engine to idle, and then we're going to start adjusting our idle screw based on our vacuum measurement. As I'm all set, I know it'll be tough to see, but there's my valve. It's in there by about, what, that 1/4 inch or so. And I might have misspoke. We're actually going to adjust the cruise circuit, and I have the wrong Allen wrench. All right, now that I have the right Allen, when the engine's running, we're going to tighten it slowly until our gauge jumps off of the 0 to 1 reading. 3 or more would be preferable. Once you get to that setting, slowly back it off till it goes back down to 0-1 range, and then add another 3/4 counterclockwise, basically loosening it another 3/4. Once you're there, we're going to test for the swap over point, and you're going to bump the throttle as quick as you can to see if it will jump off of 0. That means it's perfect. All right, guys, let's start tightening. I'm watching my gauge. Oh, there it goes. So there's a go. See how it jumps if I'm turning? And I go back, goes to 0, right there. Then I'm going to do another 3/4 of a turn, right there. Let's bump the throttle, see what happens. See how it's jumping off? Yes, sir. All right, you guys saw that behavior where when you tip in, the needle jumps off and it goes back to 0. That's actually what you want to see. So I'm good. Now I can take my valve off, and remember, we got to put that plug back in there. Again, that's just for testing. That doesn't mean that was your manifold vacuum measurement, but that's my current setting. Now the beauty is here, you need to check this anytime you basically change spark plugs. You want to see if you're getting too much oil in here, and maybe even take it apart. If it looks gunky, you can take it apart and clean it. Obviously, this is not a low-cost item. It is very trick, and it will save a lot of grief. Anytime you change your settings on your idle mixture screws or your throttle body, you might want to readjust your vacuum settings. So all good stuff. Now the fun part, let's go for a test drive. You want to pay attention to see if there's anything new that pops up, like lagging when you're trying to accelerate or stumbling. So it should be fine, but I love test driving, so I'm gonna go do that. All right, here we go. See how much fun we're gonna have. So nothing crazy going on. Feels good to me. All right, that test drive went really well, and something I failed to mention on the previous video where I first fired this thing, the valve was wide open and I could actually smell oil burning when I'm sitting at a traffic light. I didn't know if it was burning off of the headers or not, but I'm pretty sure it was because the valve was wide open. And now that it's tuned, I don't smell that oil. I'm super excited about that. So I hope it helps you guys out in your build. Again, doesn't matter what engine you have, it's going to help you. Be sure to check out all the instructions, all the white papers on M.E. Wagner's website. It's very helpful and explains why you need this valve and to work properly. But more importantly, subscribe if you haven't, because next week I'm taking this on a road trip. It'll be the first real test drive. It's 115 miles up to a Pontiac only show and 115 miles back. There better not be any leaks. So far there haven't been, and we're gonna find out the hard way. Building fast, driving faster. See ya.